Hi, folks. This is JC. This is chapter 2 of a detective story. Sheriff Perkins' speech was starting to wind down at last. It wasn't that he was ready to stop speaking. He was just running out of something to say that had anything to do with Ann Barton, the mayor, himself, the police department, or the case Ann had solved. The mayor stepped back up to the podium and once again addressed the crowd. With a flourish, he motioned to Ann Barton. Now it gives me great pleasure to call to the podium the woman of the hour, the policewoman whose untiring and diligent investigation has brought to a close a horrible mystery that had haunted our fair city for 4 long years. Once again, our citizens may walk the streets without fear. Now, thanks to the untiring efforts of Officer Ann Barton in solving this case, we may feel safe in our city, safe in our community, and even safe in our homes. The entire audience applauded loudly. Then turning to face Ann, the mayor said, "Officer Barton, we thank you for a job well done. Will you step forward, please?" Ann stepped forward and faced the mayor. She smiled slightly and stood at attention. The mayor stepped closer to her and with a flourish said, "It is an honor to present to you, Officer Ann Barton, this certificate of excellence. Thank you from the Tulsa City Police Department, the Tulsa City Council, and especially from the citizens of the fair city of Tulsa City." With his left hand, he placed the rolled up certificate in her left hand, and he shook her right hand. Ann took the mayor's hand in hers and smiled and said, "Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I thank the police department and the people of Tulsa City for this honor." Ann stood still for a moment, not sure of what to do next. She felt a little awkward and made a slight move to turn and leave. As she took a step backwards, the mayor held up his right hand and loudly spoke into the microphones. "Hold it, officer." With a shocked look on her face, Ann stopped. Grinning broadly, the mayor reached out and drew Ann back to the podium. Then turning to the assembled crowd, he said, "Now for the real reason we're here today. The certificate awarded to Officer Ann Barton is well deserved, but I think it is too good for a uniformed police officer." The crowd was silent. Everyone looked first at the mayor and then at Ann. Ann's face was blank. She had no idea what the mayor meant by what he had just said. The mayor looked grim for just an instant, waiting to see the effect his statement would have on the assemblage. Then he said, "Officer Ann Barton, will you step forward?" Ann looked puzzled, but did as she was ordered. She still stood at attention, and the mayor stood facing her with his right hand in his pocket. Then drawing his hand out of his pocket, he smiled and said, "Officer Ann Barton, it is an honor for me to award you this badge as a symbol of my appreciation for a job well done, and as special thanks from the city and the citizens of Tulsa City, Ohio." And with that, he pinned a large, shiny silver badge on the lapel of Ann's jacket. It said, "Detective Third Grade, 1077. Then the mayor stepped back and extended his right hand to take hers in a hearty handshake and said, "Congratulations, Detective Ann Barton." At precisely 6 o'clock, Gerald Prosser knocked on the door of the Detective Ann Barton's apartment. The ceremony had been a bit of a letdown for Prosser. He had expected more than what had turned into a hometown gathering. Most of the other reporters felt the same way, and many of them left almost as soon as the ceremony was over. The door opened immediately, and Ann Barton appeared and said, "Mr. Prosser?" Prosser answered, "That's me. May I come in?" "You're right on time," said Ann. "Are you always so punctual, or are you just in a hurry to get this over with so you can leave this burg? Most of the others have already left." "There wasn't much left to see or hear after the ceremony ended," said Prosser. "I hope you don't take offense, but there isn't much here that would hold a reporter's interest, at least as far as I can see." "You're here," Ann said. "I have a reason to be here. Maybe there's something I still need to find out." Ann studied Prosser's face for a moment. Why was a top crime reporter so curious about this case? Or was he just interested in her? Not likely, she thought. She tried not to notice his strong, angular face with the piercing gray eyes that always seemed to be taking everything in. Prosser was a middle-aged man, 46 years middle-aged. He had the lean body of a man 10 years younger. He was 11 years older than Anne was, but it wasn't obvious. At 5 feet 11 inches tall and 195 pounds, he was just as he had been at age 36. He married once, but after 2 months of wedded bliss to a wonderful girl, he was widowed. Prosser was going into the service the coming month for a 3-year tour of duty, and he and his wife, Patricia, were deeply in love, and each as curious and active as the other. Patricia was a small woman, barely over 5 feet tall, with long brown hair and blue eyes, and she never weighed more than 105 pounds. She was athletic and enjoyed anything physical, especially hiking the tall peaks. They seemed to have everything in common and thoroughly enjoyed each other in every way. They often traveled to the Rockies for weekend outings. They made many trips, trying to do all they could in the short time they had before he must leave for his tour of duty in the Army. But their passion for hiking would also be their curse. On a hiking trip along a well-traveled path that wound up one of the lower hiking trails in the area, Patricia stepped on a small stone and turned her foot just as they crossed the only ledge on the trail. The mountain was on her right side and a 60-foot drop was on her left side. Her ankle turned on the stone, and as she lurched sideways, she grabbed the limb of a tree. The limb split off the tree, and she fell down the incline, striking her head on a rock on the way down. She was dead before she hit the bottom. It all happened so fast. It was over almost before it began, and so was their honeymoon. Prosser grieved for his wife for a month, then went into the Army. His 3-year hitch turned into 20. Anne was an interesting, attractive woman. At 5 feet 6 inches, she was tall for a woman. She was slender at 110 pounds, but was deceptively strong and agile. She regularly exercised on a gym set she kept at home and ran for an hour every day on the treadmill in her kitchen. Her expression was always calm, and she gave the impression that she missed a lot by her disinterest, but such was not the case. She watched everybody and noticed everything that went on around her. She was a brunette, turned blonde, almost platinum. Her hair was medium length and worn loosely against her collar. Her eyes were a strange shade of green, flecked with brown, almost like the skin of some lizards, only much brighter. Anne said, "Come in," and stepped aside for Prosser. He entered a large living area, well furnished with early American furniture that had a well-used look to it. She motioned him to the sofa and asked him if he would like something to drink. He said coffee would be fine, and she left to get the coffee. She served the coffee from a china tea set into delicate china cups and set a china sugar dish and creamer on a tray in front of him on the coffee table. She watched as he purposely took one sugar cube and dropped it into his cup, poured in a small amount of cream, and stirred it twice. Anne noted the ritual. "Do you always do it like that?" she asked. "I guess so," he answered. "I never noticed before. I guess I'm a man of habit." And Anne took her coffee black. Anne went back into the kitchen and returned in a minute with a saucer covered with chocolate chip cookies and sugar wafers. "Help yourself," she said. He grinned and took one of each. He bit a piece from the chocolate chip cookie, chewed it and swallowed it, then dipped the wafer in the coffee and ate that as well. "Maybe I should have fixed dinner," she said. "No, this is fine, but thanks anyhow," he replied. "Okay," she said. "Now what do you want to know?" "Well, let me see. First, would you mind telling me a little about yourself?" "What would you like to know?" she asked. "Are you married?" he asked. "No," she replied. "How long have you been on the force?" 6 years, she said. "And how old are you?" he asked. "Mr. Prosser, I think you know all that already. What do you really want to know?" "Okay," he said. "How did you solve a murder that happened over 4 years ago without any additional evidence?" Anne didn't answer right away. She looked as if she were trying to figure out what to say next. She stood up and walked to the door and peered out. Then she sat back down and looked into his eyes. It was deduction, she said, like Sherlock Holmes. I went back over every bit of evidence we had, which wasn't much, and took out whatever didn't fit and left in whatever did. Whoever I had even the slightest reason to suspect, I left in, and whomever I couldn't suspect, I took out. I just got an email on my phone, droid. Then I approached each person as though I know more than I really did. As though I knew more than I really did. I pretended to have additional information that I would make public soon, and I got lucky. The killer believed me, and he panicked, and he confessed. That's it? Asked Prosser. That's it, said Anne. Is that what you told the chief and the rest? Asked Prosser. That's what I told them, said Anne. Who helped you with the case? Asked Prosser. No one, said Anne. What made you start it up again? Asked Prosser. Anne hesitated for a second and said, I just started thinking about it one day while I was on vacation. It had bothered me from time to time, knowing someone around me was a killer and always wondering who it was. It could be someone I work with or a neighbor. In a small town like Tullis City, everyone is a neighbor. Maybe I got scared thinking about it. I don't think so, he said. Curious maybe, but not scared. No, not scared, not you. I'm not sure how to take that, Anne said. Do I look that tough? He didn't answer right away. When he spoke, it wasn't to answer her last question about how tough she may look. Miss Barton, he says, I hope you don't take offense, but I think you're leaving something out. That couldn't be the entire story. What are you not telling me? Anne's face reddened slightly, and she rose and said, Mr. Prosser, did you read the confession, the account of what happened? Yes, I did, he said. Then you know it all. This interview is over. Well, hell, he said, I did offend you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Anne did not smile. She just nodded. You're forgiven, she said. Good night. Anne thought about the confession she had gotten from Jim Slater. How ridiculous the murder had been. How unnecessary. How unfortunate. She knew that this whole case-solving scenario would look suspicious to anyone who checked into it. But only she knew the whole story, and only she ever would. This is the end of chapter 2. Thank you very much. I hope you'll come back and read chapter 3, and I hope you enjoyed this. This is JC.